Dave, when did you become interested in aviation?
Well, so I grew up in a family that was involved in aviation. My father was a F-4 pilot in Vietnam, flew pilots, mostly reconnaissance up until the time he deployed. And then my older brother was a couple years ahead of me at the Air Force Academy, pilot. Younger brother, a couple years behind me, pilot. So it's a bit of a family business.
So, can you talk us through some of your initial ground and flying training once you joined the Air Force?
Yeah, the typical process. Well, it started actually at the Air Force Academy, where I got a chance to be in the glider program. That was some of my first exposure. I also talked my father into giving me a loan to get a private pilot's license when I was a freshman. So I did that, and then got to fly, with the Aero Club there. And then typically, if you make it into undergraduate pilot training, which is a very competitive process, even more competitive now. I was just out at the academy this week, and they were telling me about it.
Wow.
If you make it into the pilot training process, you go to a undergraduate pilot training base. We call it UPT, and it's about a year's worth of training to get your wings initially, and then from that point forward, you're somewhere in there. You're selected for a specific aircraft, a fighter, a bomber, a transport, unmanned, and then you follow up with more focused training in that particular weapon system. So your training never stops throughout your career.
When you were going through training, did you have your sights set on a certain aircraft, or were you chosen to go to a certain aircraft?
So when it was, I think it was at Ramstein Air Force Base when I was in high school,
Hmm.
and there was a test aircraft, this brand new YF-16. It was a brand spanking new airplane. I remember it was painted red, white, and blue, and it was flying over my neighborhood, I think on a demonstration of some
Oh,
kind.
wow.
This is in the late 70s. And I remember looking up thinking, that is the coolest airplane I've ever seen. Right? That was the first find. And then as an instructor pilot at Shepherd, I was flying T-38s. And I remember I had another instructor in the back seat, and we were out doing some maneuvering in the airspace, and all of a sudden I looked down, and there was an F-16 that was flying below the airspace because they were headquartered in Dallas Fort Worth area.
Hmm.
And so I decided I want to get a closer look, and so I took my T-38 and maneuvered, so I was basically outside the wing, and the F-16 pilot saw me, and he wagged his wings, which is a signal for come in closer.
Yeah.
And he led me through a series of you know sort of wing maneuvers while I was on his wing, and then he raised his visor, gave me a salute, lit the afterburner, and went straight vertical.
Oh, wow.
And I remember thinking, okay, that's what I want to fly.
So, can you talk us through the role of the F-16 when you joined, and can you talk us through some of your ground and flying training once you joined the F-16 force?
Yeah, so as a fighter airplane, I started flying in the first C model of the aircraft,
Okay.
which was the a bit of an upgraded version, but it was brand new. I think it was Block 20 or 25, right? Which in my when I was going through initial training, they were I was at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina, and my flight commander then Captain, I think, or Major Larned, Mongo Larned, said, "Hey, we're pushing up your training." And I thought, okay. And what I didn't know was that the squadron had gotten a no notice deployment order to go to Oman,
Oh, okay.
and we were going to be deploying, and they wanted me to be able to go on the deployment. So I had passed my check ride, and then got notified in my first hour as a mission capable F-16 pilot was crossing the ocean with my
Wow.
flight to go to Oman. And as you might imagine, just fascinating.
Yeah.
Fast forward now to 1990, and we're the first squadron to deploy, the second squadron to deploy to the Middle East after Saddam invaded Kuwait. And so we were in Abu Dhabi at Al Dhafra Air Base for upwards of 8 months through Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So very early in my career, I got a chance to employ the F-16 in combat with my teammates, and it was quite an experience.
I suppose like diving into the deep end helped you as an aviator.
I think it absolutely did. Mm-hmm. When I look back, when I became Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and I was doing my own self-analysis of gifts and gaps. What is it that I bring to the table that I can help move the organization? Mm-hmm. What are areas I'm just not good in that I need to surround myself with people who are good in those things? I came to the conclusion that the one thing I knew very well was joint combat operations, because I hadn't missed a fight between, Desert Storm to both Allied force and deliberate force, the 2 Balkan campaigns, then into Afghanistan and Iraq. I've been in part of every one of those campaigns. So what I knew was joint warfighting. Mm-hmm. And I knew how the air and space component fit into joint warfighting. That really came true also when I was deployed for 2 years as the air and space component commander for Central Command. So responsible for all the air and space assets in theater. That also brought home this whole concept of joint warfighting. So every one of these campaigns taught me and gave me tools that I could use as Chief of Staff of the Air Force to focus on joint warfighting, which was my singular focus, for 4 years.
And did you find it easy or relatively easy integrating with like other nations coming from the US Air Force?
Very much a common language among aviators, and English is a understood common language in aviation, both commercially and militarily. So, especially when I was chief, I acknowledged that there are 3 hats you wear as a service chief, and part of your job is to keep those hats in balance and to spend time in each. Appropriate amount of time in each. Yeah. The first one is the most obvious. It's the service chief. Organize, train, equip, present forces to a combatant commander to be able to fight and win the nation's battles. That's job hat number 1, if you will. Hat number 2 is a joint chief. As a joint chief with my fellow chief of naval operations, Commandant of the Marine Corps, Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Space Operations, the chairman and the vice chairman, we become the joint chiefs, and our job is to provide military advice to the president, the commander-in-chief, the Congress, the National Security Council. And so as a joint chief, I had to make sure I understood exactly what my fellow component commanders needed from air and space, and how I integrated into their operations and how they integrated into mine. And so that's the joint chief hat. And the third chief hat is the one you're asking about, which is International Air Chief. Mm-hmm. Right? I had to be fully aware that my teammates, my fellow air chiefs around the world, they were paying close attention to what the American Air Force, as the largest Air Force, was doing, how we were organizing, how we were training, how we were equipping, how we're what technology we were bringing forward, what our priorities were, so that when it came time for us to join forces and use military power to make the world better for the kids and grandkids, where there was a recognition that we rarely ever do that alone. We almost always do that with allies and partners. So the more time I spend in that hat, advancing us as a coalition and allied team, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get talk about obviously your famous shoot down, which I really want you to go into detail, like you can talk us through that day. One of our favorite subjects on this channel is DACT. So did you ever get to go up against Hornets, F-15s and the F-16, and how did it fare?
All the time. Yeah, as a matter of fact, you found you learn a ton about how each different aircraft were, which which zones in flight each aircraft is optimized for. The F-16, for sure, when it came to close-in visual fighting, was optimized at high speed, high turn rate, high G, right? And the advancements that occurred under my watch, and perhaps more important after I left, which I've seen now, that give it some pretty significant advantage. It's one of the best fighters in the world in the visual fight. Having said that, I remember like fighting F-18s and learning the hard way. You don't get slow with an F-18, right? Because its ability to, in a fly-by-wire system in the F-16, where you have a lot of electronics that are helping you with which works incredibly well at high speed. There are things at low speed that limit your maneuverability that are not the same in an F-18, for instance. So you learn the hard way to keep the mock up when you're fighting F-18s. Perhaps, though, just equally important, certainly, you sort of live for the close-in visual fight, right, where you're pulling 9Gs and you're turning and burning. But equally, if not more important, is the long-range beyond line of sight work. All right, and this is a combination of radar technology, all of the different sensors, bringing things from on the airplane, off the airplane, merging that information in a way that gives you better situational awareness farther out than the adversary. And I'll never forget my Israeli air chief counterpart, who told me once, he says, Dave, I'm not integrating the F-35 into the Israeli Air Force. I'm integrating the Israeli Air Force into the F-35.
Right.
Because it is such an information dominant system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it provides the pilot so much situational awareness even before he takes off or she takes off. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it's quite phenomenal. So we've come a long way, and I think the Air Force is doing a great job of moving things forward to the next generation.
And one more last question has just popped in my head here before we move on to your shoot down. Did you always fly on GE engines, or were you Pratt and Whitney as well?
Both. Matter of fact, right. I flew both. Started off in Pratt and Whitney, and then moved into GE and back and forth. There was always a joke that the maintainers loved the Pratt and the pilots loved the GE.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. But Dave. So, let's talk about obviously your famous 1999 shoot down. If you can talk us through that day for our viewers, that'd be great, and how you came out of that and progressed in your career.
Yeah, well, no self-respecting fighter pilot, jumps on a podcast and brags about getting shot down, right? Right. I would say I share that I brilliantly maneuvered my F-16 into an enemy missile. It was interesting. About 2 weeks before the shoot down, I had been flying a mission on my way. I was on my way back into Aviation Air Base. We were navigating around thunderstorms, and I thought we were well clear of them when I got hit by lightning. And luckily the lightning hit the wingtip, exited out at the back end, didn't cause any serious damage. I had live munitions on board, but nothing there. What was interesting though, it was a loud flash, huge explosion, cockpit lit up bright white, and then of course you get into the damage assessment and taking the aircraft and making sure you can safely get it on the ground. Turned out that was not a bad prelude to getting hit by an enemy missile, because it was a loud explosion, a big white flash in the cockpit, and very similar. The difference was when I started doing my damage assessment, became clear fairly soon that the engine had been taken out, which is not a good thing in a single engine airplane. So the airplane was going to hit the ground. The question was whether I was going to be in it. And it's a funny thing too that you sometimes military training that we get for certain scenarios is parked in our brains and compartmentalized, and we just keep it there to call forward when we need it. So I went through survival, evasion, I went through all this training in 1979 at the Air Force Academy, and I was shot down in 1999. So here I am 20 years later, right? And I'm in the chute. Seats work perfectly, which I thank my crew chiefs and industry for all the work they did on that. Because it is 1,000 unrelated miracles that happens in about 7 seconds, and anything could go wrong, and everything worked perfectly for me. And the training came right back. So it's like I was right there, either at Fort Benning with the black hats telling me to feet and knees together, don't look down, right, on my parachute landing fall, or going through the sequence of getting ready for the parachute landing fall, and then what I had to do next. Luckily, I landed in a nice, reasonably plowed field, had a good parachute landing fall, and then grabbed all my gear and ran to the tree line, and then started getting set up for the rescue. And I had seen some high terrain after I steered the aircraft away from any villages that were below, and so I was going to make my way up to high terrain for the rescue itself. And the enemy was out in force that night. Really? They knew an aircraft had gone down, and they always start at the crash site and start working their way outwards from there. I ended up getting very close to a few Serbian soldiers who were out looking for me, but wow. By the grace of God, I was able to meld into the ravine in the high grass, and eventually got picked up. And the folks that picked me up, they're incredibly courageous young men, because we didn't have women in special ops back then. That's been since changed, which I'm glad. And these young guys, they risked everything as the sun was about to come up. Enemies out in force, and they were not going home until they brought me with them. And so, I'm sitting here today as a proud father and grandfather of 5.
Absolutely.
Because of them. And they get a bottle of scotch every year on the anniversary of the rescue. And as you might imagine, they're praying I live a long and healthy life.
Absolutely, yeah. But one question I've got here, Dave, is when obviously you eject, and if you need a crash site, do you get told to bring everything you can, or do you just are you told to just leave your helmet, leave everything, or do you have to take certain things so the enemy, as it were, don't have any intel on anything?
Take what you need.
Right.
Especially if you need to travel. So I buried most all my gear in the ravine, the bottom, and just sort of, when I say buried, covered it with leaves and brush and what have you. So just, more than anything, something that wouldn't highlight if somebody's shining a flashlight or whatever. And I took just my survival kit and my radio gear, what I had in my vest, combat vest, and that's all I took with me.
And so when you were, I'm guessing you rushed back to medical as well. Was that adrenaline still pumping then, or was it just kind of a relief when you got on that helicopter?
It was pretty steady throughout, honestly, because I was very confident. I can say that now. It's probably easier for viewers to say, "Oh yeah, right." Now he's pretty confident he was going to get out. But honestly, while I was there, I can tell you, I was very confident I was getting out that night. And if not that night, if the sun came up, I felt like I had enough cover that I could hide and evade, for long enough to be able to get out the next night, right? Mm-hmm. So I was really preserving battery power in my radio, water, other things that I think I needed in case I needed to be there for a longer period of time. I had a little bit of shrapnel wounds on my right hand from when the explosion hit, and there was a doc on the C-130 that was with me as I was flying back, and I wasn't really paying much attention. I'm right-handed, so he's bandaging up, stitching up and bandaging up my right hand while I'm writing down notes with my left hand, because I know I'm going to be debriefed
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
Excel debrief, and I want to make sure I got my thoughts clear when I get home.
yeah.
And then I look over to my right hand. He's got this thing wrapped from fingers to
Wow.
elbow and shoulder, right, with ace bandage and everything. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, Doc, I, I mean, you got like just a couple of band-aids, you know?" He
Yeah.
said, he said, "Yeah, I guess I probably a little overdid it. You're my only patient, you know." I said, "Yeah, let's do a couple of band-aids." So he unwrapped everything, a couple of band-aids. Helpful because I got to fly. I flew the next night.
That's incredible. And I believe the tail from that F-16, and is it the canopy as well? Is in a museum somewhere?
Yeah, I've never had a chance to go to the museum.
Oh,
People have
right.
asked me if I've gone into it, but it's basically all the gear that I had, I think, is on display in Belgrade. I used to joke with the lieutenants at Aviano and my squadron. They have a group in most squadrons called the LPA, which stands for Lieutenants Protection Association, and
Okay.
it's for all lieutenants to you know work together to conspire against the commander, and 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 have fun, and be part of the spirit of the squadron. And I used to joke with them and say, "Hey, it's time for a spirit mission to Belgrade, don't you think? I mean, it's not theirs. Grab a van, go get that stuff."
Hmm.
Uh, Luckily, they knew I wasn't serious, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's all on display there. Someday I'll make it in.
Yeah. And you said you went flying. Did you say the next day after
Hmm.
that incident? Would that happen now? Would that be, or was that just like, I'm ready to go? Is it up to you, or do they like? How does that work? Because I'm sure like you must have needed bed rest.
Um, so I, talked to my wing commander when I landed, Fig Leaf, and I said, "Hey, I don't know if you've had a chance to think about this. I've spent some time thinking about it. I'm not a young captain who just got shot down. I'm a squadron commander. And I need to get
Mm,
my squadron back on the horse, make sure they know that there's
mm.
nothing, hey, no big deal. You know, things happen, right? It's combat, back on the horse." And so I said, I need to get back in the air. And so I'd like to get home, get some rest, and go back and fly tonight. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, if it's okay he looked at my wife, Dawn. He said, if it's okay with her, it's okay with me."
Right, there
So
you go.
So Dawn, being just so great, she said, "Yep, I get it. You got to get back on the horse." My oldest daughter was struggling a little bit with this whole daddy got shot down, right?
Okay.
And flying combat missions from home was very unique. That was not in the squadron commander handbook, right? My entire experience up to that point had been deploying forward away from the family
Mhm.
to you know, to fly combat missions. But now you go out, you get shot at, you come home, you mow the grass. You go out, you get shot at, you come home, you take care of the kid. It was a bit odd, to be honest. But
Yeah,
Dawn and our daughters were there, and my oldest daughter was struggling a little bit. So I thought, you know, all right, where's my highest priority here? I got to get back in the air. I really need to do that tonight. I also need to make sure my daughter's okay. So I decided uh, I'm taking a night to make sure she's fine. So I
brilliant.
spent that night, made sure that the kids were fine, Dom was fine, everything was good. And then I got back in the air the next night and flew every night after that.
Yeah, that's a great mentality and certainly great leadership as well. But before we move on to your F-117 time, overall, did you enjoy flying the F-16? And what would you say the best part of the F-16 is? Is it its maneuverability, or is it ability to adapt to any situation?
Yeah, I mean it is my favorite airplane I ever flew. I think the one you take into combat, or the one that takes you into combat,
Mhm.
is the one you fall in love with, and it's where I had my most formative experiences uh, in combat operations, from Desert Storm through the Balkans, through Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, it's an incredible weapon system, and one of the things I love the most about it is it's almost its own international nation state,
Yeah,
right? I mean, there's so many countries that fly them. When we get together and we start talking about interoperability, it doesn't get more interoperable than that,
yeah,
because you're walking out to the airplane and it's going to share information. It's going to fly at the same speeds, same altitudes, and and you're going to have the same formative experiences as a fighter pilot, so that there's an immediately a common language and a camaraderie that happens that, the first time you meet, either, in the air or at the bar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think isn't the UAE at the moment getting Block 70s or something like that as well. So it's still going. It's still going and advancing. It's an incredible jet.
Yes, it is.